guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, HOA banned disabled girls' emotional support kangaroo and faces hell in return. My daughter, Alicia, is the most beautiful and lively person I have ever known. And she has Down syndrome. I proudly say that she doesn't let it slow her down or inhibit her in any way in life. But as she became a teen, she started to have anxieties and insecurities that she had never had before, so I enrolled in her a wildlife rehabilitation program for kids with disabilities. She thrived there and the people who run the program are truly amazing individuals. I couldn't have asked for a better recreational activity for Alicia to be in. There's even a sister program that lets the kids ride horses and help assist the veterinarians with other tasks. Then one day, a rare opportunity came up. Alicia had been going there for about 6 months and one of the vets and her had really bonded. Dr. Brooks, who worked at the zoo as well, brought in a baby kangaroo one day, saying that she needed someone who was willing to foster him. His mother had died, and he would require feedings every few hours and lots of care. Dr. Brooks chose Alicia and our family to take care of this little marsupial. He was a red kangaroo that would one day grow to be very big and dangerous, but for now he was a precious little thing that needed a mother. Alicia was so excited, and it just lit me up inside to see how happy she was. The first week with the kangaroo, which we named Jonathan, Johnny, was an interesting, somewhat stressful, yet wonderful experience. He and Alicia seemed to bond immediately. We had him out in the yard and a few neighbors that had kids my daughter's age came over and saw him. I have an older daughter named Samantha who is incredible on the piano, varsity basketball player and honor roll student. She has lots of friends that decided to come by and see the adorable kangaroo, so we had some traffic that may have drawn some attention to us from the HOA. It only took 2 weeks before we got our first warning letter. It said that Jonathan wasn't a house pet, therefore we needed to remove him from our property. They also labeled kangaroos as dangerous animals in the letter, which I may agree with if we were in the outback and came across a wild full-grown male. But little Johnny? He barely weighs 10 pounds and has to be bottle-fed every 2 hours. He's not dangerous to anyone. I didn't tell Alicia about the letter because I didn't want to upset her, but I did show her older sister, Sam. She, being the fiery young woman that she is, started telling friends. A few days later we received another letter, this time more threatening, stating that we had to remove Jonathan from the property by the end of the week or they would be fining us $100 a day for having an unauthorized pet in the home. I don't understand why they care so much about a little kangaroo. I ended up calling the number in the letter, but they never answered. Samantha took to social media and so did her friends. Facebook was a huge influence as the town's chatter page blew up with comments from people shaming the HOA. Samantha and her friends posted pictures of Alicia and Johnny, the evidence of how happy she was written all over her face. During all of this business I had started the process of making Jonathan, Alicia's emotional support animal. I know that we will only have him for a short time, but the certificate would be a nice remembrance for her. Plus it may make the HOA back off if I have ESA advocates in my corner. Alicia realized there was something going on and started asking us questions. She was worried and wanted to be involved. Johnny is her responsibility after all. I encouraged her not to be concerned and to only worry about taking care of her kangaroo. It didn't take long at all before the social media influence that Samantha and her friends developed with Johnny and Alicia was taking the town and nearby cities by storm. The story had reached out to thousands of people and the HOA was in the spotlight. And not in a good way. There was very little support for the HOA and it was clear that there were going to be a lot of negative comments and attention directed towards them. We went several days without any word from the homeowners association, then we finally received a phone call. It was a woman who introduced herself as Lisa, the lead of the HOA. Interesting that she chose to finally give me a ring, after they basically got reamed on social media. Lisa seems nice and cordial enough. After the niceties she tells me that she saw the posts about the HOA trying to get rid of Johnny. I tell her that everything in the posts was true and that she needs to be rethinking the way she treats disabled individuals. I tell her about Alicia and how Johnny and she have bonded and how he has been a great thing for her. Lisa goes on to say that the reason that they were asking us to find somewhere else for him is because she doesn't feel like he's an appropriate animal to have in the suburbs. I then explain that he is only a baby and that we are only fostering him temporarily. Lisa's tone changed to a somewhat short one, saying that she doesn't believe in having wild animals in quiet, family neighborhoods. So, I asked, tired of the conversation, are you going to let us keep him? That's when Alicia pops up next to me. I'm not sure when she got there, but she seemed adamant that she talked on the phone. I let her take my phone and Alicia starts talking. I don't think she gave Lisa much room to speak after she introduced herself. Words began pouring out of my daughter, not angry words but happy ones. She said to the surely surprised HOA leader, that she was so happy that she has been able to take care of her kangaroo. That Jonathan was silly and snuggly and that she loved him. She said thank you, for letting us keep her sweet kangaroo. I guess she misunderstood when I asked Lisa if we could keep him and thought that she heard her say yes. I'm not sure. But either way, Alicia's excitement and words seemed to have swayed Lisa. By the time that I took the phone back from Alicia, Lisa was chuckling on the other end. She said, okay, I'll let him stay, but only if you promise me that you are going to send him away before he is the size of a grown man. We both laugh and agree to the terms. Lisa turned out to be a great person and publicly apologized for everything, saying that she misunderstood the situation and no longer wanted to evict little Jonathan. She even came over with the other board members to meet him and see what all the fuss was about in the first place. We shared some wine and snacks and had good conversations. A few months later, Johnny went to the zoo and made some kangaroo friends. Alicia is allowed to go and see him sometimes when Dr. Brooks is there. Lisa even has a daughter that is a little younger than mine and they have gotten along great. They come over on occasion and we enjoy each other's company. I'll admit that my HOA isn't as toxic as others. I'm pretty lucky that I have a good friend and understanding board leader. The next story is titled, Bury an Old Water Tower to Use as an Emergency Shelter? Sure, what could go wrong with that? TL. Dr. Lotto winner neighbor asks my dad and friends to help him bury a water tower under his house to use as an emergency shelter. They know it's a stupid idea, but Lotto guy offers up big money. Rains come and tower gets pushed up through the floor, destroying the house. So, this actually happened to my dad a few years ago. He lived in an area right along the Texas-Oklahoma border in fairly rural area. My dad primarily worked in pipeline construction. One day my dad noticed someone had purchased a very large property not too far down the road. Turns out, that the new neighbor was actually from the suburbs around Columbus, Ohio and had just won a lottery prize. The man hadn't won the jackpot but had won a smaller prize around $2 million. My dad was also originally from Ohio, so he decided to say hello. A few days later he meets the Lotto neighbor, we'll call him Jim. Jim starts telling my dad about his dream to build his own self-sustaining homestead far away from the rest of society. Jim was very interested in prepping and convinced of a soon-to-come global societal collapse. He used his Lotto winning to purchase the land and begin building his homestead. My dad honestly didn't find this that odd because many people in the area had some tendency toward independence and those prepping shows were popular at the time. About a year later, Jim reached out to my dad to ask for help with a construction project that involves burying a large water tower in the ground. My dad is a little confused but decided to go take a look. Turns out Jim bought an old water tower, about 15 feet in diameter and about 15 high, for the purpose of reusing it as an underground shelter. Jim had recently completed the build of a prefab home on his property and wanted the water tower buried partially under the new home with a trapdoor built in a closet to access it. My dad immediately thought this was the dumbest thing he'd ever heard and proceeded to tell Jim all the potential issues with his plan. Jim cut him off and told my dad that his contractor for the home had basically told him the same and so had several others he'd contacted to try get them to bury this water tower. However, Jim believed this was simply laziness on their part and had the utmost confidence in his plan. My dad left but a day or so later Jim contacts him again and asks about paying my dad to let him rent some construction equipment he had on his own property. My dad again goes over with him what a bad idea this is and how no legitimate crew would ever do this for him. Jim brings up using my dad's equipment and illegal laborers. My dad decides well if he's determined, Might as well make a few bucks off lotto winner Jim. He quotes him some ridiculous price to rent his equipment and says he can ask a guy at work he knows about gathering up a group of Mexican day laborers. Jim agrees to the crazy price and my dad gets in touch with a Mexican friend who had a crew of day laborers. A bit later my dad asks his friend about how the project is going. He tells my dad how nasty Jim treated the workers, how stupid the whole plan is and how his specifications for how he wanted this built were completed idiotic. Whenever they'd offer up suggestions or point out why something he wanted was wrong, he'd essentially shut them down and use a bunch of slurs for Mexicans. So, they buried the water tower and built this secret entrance exactly as he wanted, knowing it was completely stupid. He mentioned they only completed the job because Jim was paying them way more than they were used to making. Everyone agreed Jim was a jerk, but all the more reason to gouge your prices and take his money. A year or so goes by when my dad gets a frantic call from Jim. It had rained quite a bit, which was unusual for the area, and now the entire ground floor area of the back of his home was bowed upward about 2 feet. My dad goes to Jim's and takes a look around, realizing what has happened. Given that they had essentially just buried a large hollow object underneath his home, the rain caused the water tower to be pushed upward and right through his first floor. My dad explained the situation and Jim immediately lost it, starting ranting about how he should have never used those Mexican laborers and how he was gonna make them come fix it. My dad mentioned how that was probably impossible since most of them go back and forth across the border, but Jim was livid. My dad later found out from Jim that his insurance would not cover the damage to his home because he had buried a water tower under it without telling anyone. He mentioned trying to sue the insurance company, but that went nowhere. He also tried numerous times to find the day laborers but was told you get what you get when you hire illegal workers to do a project that would never have gotten a permit. Over the months afterward there was a lot of fallout for Jim, and he couldn't even live in his home due to the damage. It eventually was torn down to be able to remove the water tower from beneath it. He burned through his lotto winnings pretty fast, so he didn't have anything left to rebuild it. He ended up selling the land and moving away about a year later. The next story is titled, "Am I the a-hole for starting a house project without discussing it with my wife?" My wife, Amy, 27 female, and I, 27 male, have a spare room in our home. We've gone back and forth since we moved in 2+ years ago about what we wanted to do with it, but we never took the initiative to actually implement any of these plans. We already have a sufficient number of guest rooms and an office, so the room just sits there, unutilized. I'm not that worried about it, but my wife brings it up now and then. These mentions are just of the unused room itself, not anything concrete she actually wants to use it for. I made a new friend, Ben, 30M, about 8 months ago, and it was very much one of those, we connected from the first time we spoke to each other, situations. I've actually never had that many close male friends, so this connection is especially important to me. The conversation flowed so easily, we had loads in common. I didn't think such a huge amount of genuine love and respect for a person could be developed in less than a year, but it's been very cool to experience that and get to know him. One of the things that we bonded over was a similar love for art and music. Ben is way more talented than I am when it comes to painting, but it's something we both enjoy. His birthday is coming up soon, and I thought on top of what else I was getting him, I could turn the spare room into something similar to an art studio for us both to use. I already ordered a few things for it and was getting ready to jump into painting the walls when my wife came in and demanded to know what I was doing. I explained that I was finally fixing up the spare room. She said it was unacceptable I had done this without confirming with her that it was okay, but I didn't think I would need to since it's been 2 years and the room has basically never been touched. Am I the a-hole? Update. First off, I'd like to thank everyone who was compassionate towards me in the comments. Ben and I sat down and talked on Tuesday night about everything. It was overwhelming, to say the least. He was gentle and sweet, as always, and allowed me the time and space to say everything I needed to. That night was one of the most beautiful of my life. Acceptance, love, and trust are truly so powerful. Life-changing. Amy and I had a conversation about the spare room last night. I had been putting it off since my post a few days ago and was hoping to wait until the weekend to talk about it all, but she insisted. I did as a lot of comments suggested and used the renovation as a lead-in to talk about the other things going on. I told her that her reaction to it brought up a lot of confusing emotions for me that I've spent the last few days working through, and things continued from there. I had toyed with the idea of couples therapy and it was something she suggested, but I don't think it's a viable option. I love her, but I've come to realize that I was never in love with her like I once thought. And after getting to really and truly experience that, it wouldn't be fair to either of us if we tried to force something that I'm not capable of giving to her. I'll be splitting my time, staying in one of our guest rooms, with Ben in his apartment for the time being while we separate and work things out moving forward. Obviously, that means the room renovations have been paused until further notice. I'm really excited for the future. The last story is titled, Unregistered Vehicles Must Be Covered. TLDR: unregistered vehicles are not allowed to be parked uncovered and in view. When issued a violation notice, we covered the Jeep with a nasty tarp. This happened years ago when I lived with my parents, but it's something I remember whenever malicious compliance comes up. My first car was an '88 Jeep Wrangler that I bought off my brother in 2003. A Wrangler is a hell of a first car for a teenager, but there was a reason I could afford it. Neither my brother nor the previous owners had been kind. By the time I decided on a college 2 years later, the list of repairs needed was beyond what I was willing to put into it, not to mention parking fees. I decided I wouldn't be taking it with me. But it was a sweet ride, 4.0/5 speed out of a 91, and no one was ready to part with it, so my dad decided to park it on the side of the house for the time being. With the repairs not yet addressed, the Jeep was not getting driven, and a few months later we let the registration lapse. The very next day we received an ordinance violation notice from the township. One of our neighbors had taken note of our tag and was waiting for the day they could report it. We had one retired neighbor that we didn't get along with. Didn't hate the guy, but he had a lot of petty complaints, so we were pretty sure it was him. Well, we were upset, but my dad was ready to move a car out of the garage and put the inoperable Jeep in its place to appease the neighbor and put us in compliance. That's when I took a closer look at the ordinance and realized it specified that unregistered vehicles are not to be parked next to the house uncovered. No specific type of cover required, just some cover. So, we went out back and got our dirtiest tarp, slung it over the Jeep, and pinned it down with rocks. Our reasonably nice, if somewhat rusty, Jeep had been replaced by a mystery lump covered with a dirty tarp, and that was compliant. We were more annoyed that he has called the township on us than anything else. After a few weeks of smug satisfaction, we did finally sell the Jeep. I don't live there anymore, but I don't think my parents have had a complaint since. Hopefully that neighbor crosses the street and talks to them about problems now. Thanks for listening.